Hey TMW fans, thanks for showing up. I want to say thanks to the Patron supporters, thanks to our social media warriors that have been sharing our stuff and make it so that we can do things like this. We're here at Tucker Speed in Ogden City, Utah. We're going to get the Indian dynoed. Let's do it. So we're bringing in the Indian now onto the dyno platform. This is Tony from Tucker Speed. He's our professional today. Okay. Article, but we've been trying to sort of move into the so. Been doing video for, I don't know, about a year.
These straps aren't doing much other than in a emergency, if it were to drift while the wheel is spinning and drift sideways and like catch one of these, it's gonna try and launch this bike somewhere. So this is mainly just to
make sure it doesn't fly.
Centered on the drum, yeah.
Okay.
Next step will just be hooking up into the ignition system. What's
like
that?
Emissions test, like in the old days.
A little bit, yeah.
You put that clip on your spark plug wire.
Yeah, doing the same thing, just picking up every time it fires that way, and that's where it gets the signal for RPM on the screen.
Indian claims 100 horse at 8,100 RPM on this bike. That's what they say we get.
That at the rear wheel or at the crank?
What's that mean? Well, typically the numbers manufacturers supply for horsepower are measured at the crank. This is the absolute peak power generated by the engine before it goes through the transmission, final drive, and axle. Because all those components introduce resistance, the final horsepower number at the wheel, that is the actual power being delivered through the contact patch to the pavement, is significantly lower. You can expect wheel horsepower to be 10 to 20% lower than crank horsepower in most cases.
Let's rock it.
Right away, and you build max torque at 3,300, basically right there.
Wow.
And the torque line, I mean, it's fairly flat. It continues to make 65 foot-pounds of torque all the way through the RPM range, and then RPM starts to build to bring up horsepower.
Okay, so here we have the readout from the DynaJet machine. You can see on this chart we've got horsepower on the left axis, we've got torque on the right axis, and we've got engine RPM across the horizontal axis here at the bottom. So here's the horsepower line, and it climbs very linear, and then it peaks right here, and the peak is at 88.2 horsepower at 7,150 RPM. And this lighter red line is the torque line. You can see right here it peaks at 68.05 foot-pounds at 3,390 RPMs. There's a dip, and we'll talk about that in a second, and then the line stays pretty flat and pretty smooth all the way across. So what does that mean? Well, we've been talking all this time about how the Scout has a very linear, very manageable power delivery, and this is it. this is that nice, smooth power delivery all the way up through the RPM range. And you can see the horsepower has a very linear progression to it too. There's no bumps or anything except for this little dip here. And you'll notice it corresponds to the same dip right here in the torque line. So both dips start at the same engine RPM, and they end at the same engine RPM, roughly, and then continue to progress from there. Now, we weren't able to do an air-fuel ratio test on this bike while we did it. We weren't able to access the exhaust so that we could get those numbers. But if we had those numbers, the AFR, we could find out what's causing this dip. It's just something in the fuel map. It's leaning out right there or something. But we could look into that and find it if we were able to do that test. But it's not a big deal. It's just a little bit of a dip in the power delivery, and that's pretty common, pretty typical. And then just nice, smooth, linear progression all the way up.
Could you do a 0 to 100? Or
yeah, we could probably just do just start from 0.
okay.
And then just run it all the way out to red line.
Now this next bit is a little sketchy, and to give you some backstory, I wanted to take the Scout up to our local drag strip and for a test and tune night and get some. That's an 1/8 of a mile drag strip. That's close enough for us to get to. So we're going to do some 1/8 of a mile acceleration tests on and give you like a 0 to 60 time and a 0 to 100 time if we could make 100 miles an hour in an 1/8 of a mile. I don't think we could have. But that was the plan. Unfortunately, that morning it snowed at the track, so they had to cancel the test and tune. We weren't able to do that. So while we were getting the dyno numbers, I asked Tony if it would be possible to do like a 0 to 60 and a 0 to 100 run on the dyno. And that's not typically something that people do on dynos. It's not really accepted practice on dynos. But he humored us, we tried it anyway. So what we're going to do here is he's just going to pin it and accelerate through. And dynos have got a resistance brake on the rolling drum that builds resistance against the tire. And one of the things about like a 0 to 100 run on a dyno is you don't have any wind resistance, right? So what we did was every time he shifted, I raised the resistance 3%. And you'll see me do that in the video when it gets started. So every time he shifts, hit that button, simulate wind resistance, and according to Tony, it's pretty well agreed on that at about 15% resistance is kind of what it feels like to be doing 80-90 miles an hour on the freeway. So that's kind of your maximum resistance. And again, like, it's super sketchy. It's not real scientific the way that we did the 0 to 100 test or the acceleration test, but I thought it would be fun content for you anyway, so let's go ahead and check it out. So here's the acceleration chart. The red line is miles per hour tracked over seconds. You see it tops out right here at 119.35 miles per hour at 16.59 seconds. 120 miles an hour at 16.5 seconds. Then we can see the 0 to 60. So here's our 60 right here. Track that line across and come down, and we find that we hit 60 just under 5 seconds. So it's like 4.8, something like that. It's not really designed to test like this, like we talked about, but it's just under 5 seconds we hit 60. There's that line right down to here. This would be 5, obviously. And then 0 to 100, 100 miles an hour. Now this is nice and right on a vector, so 100 miles an hour comes at like 10 seconds. So 0 to 100 in 10 seconds. And of course, along this line you can see each one of the shifts. So there's the shift into second, there's the shift into third, there's the shift into fourth, into fifth, into sixth, and that's the rev limiter right there.
Well, it's a whole lot quieter than what I'm used to too.
I bet.
Sometimes I have to wear I have to wear plugs and then these.
Oh wow.